4:30 p.m. and I will call to order the July 16, 2020 MISD Board of Trustees Workshop. Our agenda item number one is, well, first of all, let me say that in person we have Mr. Fuller, Mr. Bishop, myself, and Mr. Murray. Mr. Marquez has business duties that keep him from attending this evening. He sends his apologies. And Mr. Kennedy is attending online. With that, we'll proceed forward with agenda item number one. It is our public comment. And we have no one signed up to provide us any public comment for this particular meeting. So we will move on to our, the purpose of this meeting is to have our discussion about the board goals workshop and our Lone Star governance update. Ms. Rivera, welcome.
Good evening, President Davis, fellow Board of Trustees, Mr. Riddick. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here tonight. This is a continuation of the conversation that we started in June. And so I wanted to come back and circle back around with some items that were asked for at the end of that session. And then for us to kind of come through and decide kind of what our next steps are in regards to some of our goals. So at the end of the last session, we really talked through proposed new language or revised language around the goals, goal progress measures, et cetera. And one of the things that the board asked was, with the new language, could we look at what the data would have been historically if this was the language that were actually in place on the prior years. So what I did was just use the same document, but now on the board reporting timeline, rather than that being the month of the year that we would report that in, what I actually did was go back and put the historical data there. So for goal one, you can see that there. For the goal progress measure 1.1, the end of the year was 2019 was 86%. You can see where we were at the end of 18 and where we were at the end of 17. And we talked through that 86% standard being consistent for the next 5 years, simply because we don't have the opportunity to impact those pre-K kids before we get them. So really 1.2 is where the difference is between June and July of us coming together. So end of year 2019 was 67%. So since that time, I've gone back and added where we were in 18, where we were in 17. So then you could look at the annual targets that are proposed to see how we targeted those out over the next 5 years.
Ms. Rivera, nothing's showing up online here as far as your, I know you've got some kind of presentation, right?
Yes, sir.
It's not showing up online.
Let me check with Mike Lloyd, because I think maybe he's running that side of the Hangout.
Gotcha. Sorry to interrupt.
Mr. Kennedy, what are you seeing actually?
Yes, it's showing that you're presenting to everyone, Ms. Rivera. So if you want, I can either run it from there or we can run it from 620 for the document. If you want, I can present from this room for the PDF if you would like.
What do you see on your screen?
Right now, what I see is that room 6, or it says, oh, maybe that's.
You just see us sitting here, or what do you see?
Yeah, I see y'all sitting there, and then I also see that it shows room 620 is presenting, but obviously nothing's coming out.
Yeah, virtually, Mr. Davis, it just says you're presenting to everyone, but it's a blank slide, and then it's just everyone run down the right-hand column, me and Kennedy and all the attendees.
All right. Mr.
There we go. Now it's working.
Okay, now we have data.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, John, for bringing that to our attention. Let me ask you, Ms. Rivera, about going back, before you move on to goal progress measure 1.2, let's go back to 1.1.
Yes, sir.
And now, are those percentage, is that assess, do we assess the percentage of pre-K students producing at least 40 letter sounds at the end of their pre-K year? Or
Yes,
at
sir.
the start?
At the end.
All right, and is it y'all's opinion that we do impact them for the year that we have them before we assess them? Is it y'all's view that we cannot improve upon 86% as a realistic matter because we only have them for that 1 year and not the previous years?
I think our theory behind that 86% is how they come to us in August is so different that we're not sure. If we get kids and do a beginning of year assessment and they're at 50%, we still need to get them to 86. If we get them and they're 65%, we still have to get them to 86%. So that 86% we feel like is the best target for them to be kindergarten ready. So that's how we settled around the 86% for pre-K.
Yeah, but my question, were you done, Rick?
Well, yeah, one follow-up, please.
Okay.
Because I know that in the 3 prior years, as you've now shown us, we improved over that 3-year period to get to 86%. But I gather you're saying 86% is as good as you realistically think can be done, given at the different levels that each of these students start at the beginning of the year?
I think that we can set the target for wherever we want to set the target. We don't ever want to put the ceiling there, but we do want to put the minimum. So whatever the target the board needs us to put there, I know that we will work hard to achieve that target.
We weren't, knowing that when we first arrived, that only 50% of our kids were hitting that goal, worked really hard to get it to 86. But every year, we only control 800 of the kids. And we got 2,200 kinder kids who are coming in. And so I think the challenge is, okay, now that we've gotten that number to 86, is that now the baseline or is that now the ceiling on what we've done around that performance? I think that's the piece because we can set it at 90, but what I don't want to do is just randomly start to select numbers out of that when we think we're approaching a good number around what that could look like around 1.1. That's part of the strategy.
Well, I guess one of the questions I would have, because in 17 it was 65%, and then in 18 it was 71%, and then 75%. Is that correct? I mean, I guess I was just looking at the goals, and I guess my question overall is that 86%. Is that something, even if it's on the lower end, is it something that the kids coming in this year, is it something they can attain? Is 86%, or are we? Because if you only have control of 800 kids,
they achieved it at the end of 19.
I think we're looking at the goal 1 instead of goal progress 1.1.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're talking about GPM 1.
Okay, I mean, I guess I didn't look off to the side. So we did gather the 86%.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir. We got the 86% at the end of 19. So of course, at the end of 20, this school year, we have no end of year assessment for pre-K as of this year. So we felt like if 86% of the pre-K students that we educate can be prepared for kinder, then that sets them up well for kinder.
But what does it do for the other 1,400? Okay, you said 2,000 students, right? Pre-K.
Measuring that versus our kids that we control.
Yeah, but you have those other kids that are coming in. They're going to be tested as well. Is that correct?
And they were included in that 86% number at the end of 19. All kids, all 2,200. Correct?
Only pre-K students on 1.1.
Oh, so this 86% represents the 800 that we have.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So if we feel like that's going to be attainable, adding those other students that are coming in that we didn't have control.
So we approach the goal, the overall goal, kinder at 7th grade reading. We know that our 800 are in a good position to be ready. 86% of them are leaving pre-K with disability. So we're saying if we can hold that standard at 86, we can begin to attack what that overall goal looks like. So this 1.1, our kids in pre-K, and setting it at 86 as we've got a baseline, not a baseline. We have a projected percentage that we said we need to.
We have a projected percentage that says we feel at 86. If we hold court at 86 on goal 1.1, we are going to be moving to achieve the standard. I hear what you're saying in regards to, well, if we did 72, 74, 86, why don't we make it 90, 95, 100? I challenge that. That 86 is a go after number.
Yeah, it makes it even tougher because you don't have control of those other kids coming in.
On
No,
on the overall goal.
I've had caused some confusion with some of my questions, but GPM 1.1 is only our kids.
Yeah, the 800.
Only
Mr.
our
Davis, I have a
pre-K
question in a minute.
students.
What?
Only our pre-K students.
Pre-K
on
students,
1.1.
yes, pre-K students. Well, I guess my, and Mr. Trischetti has a question on, you're next, but I guess I don't know quite how to ask it. I'll ask it in kind of two ways. One is, what would do we think that 86% is the percentage necessary for us to achieve, for it to be an indicator that we're going to achieve our goal 1? And along with that, it's kind of a discombobulated question, but I'm wondering about whether we put will be at least 86%.
I see. That's our right.
Is it in fact kind of a baseline to say, look, if we want to
Right.
achieve the goals we are going to set for goal 1, should we have at least 86% and change the language that way?
I think adding at least is I mean, I think that's a great idea because we want to set the ceiling, not the floor. I mean, ceiling, not the floor, not the ceiling. So at least 86% is what we should be striving for.
And that now aligns to how we were just sharing it. President Davis, the 86, I think, works. That's a good number, and it helps us allow us to know 86% of our 800 pre-K kids, we will have them at 40-letter sounds at a baseline. Now we can always achieve higher than that, but we'll have at a minimum. We got to get to that in order to meet our overall goal success.
All right, Mr. Trischetti, your question.
Thanks, and y'all may have addressed this. Sometimes the sound's pretty good and sometimes it's not, but is there a rationale for the 86%? Does research support that number in terms of literacy?
I think the 86% that we're coming from is based on our student performance. We feel like that is a strong number when you look at the number of pre-K students that we have. If at least 86% of those kids are producing those 40-letter sounds, then we know that they are kinder ready, which then helps our kinder progress measure in 1.2 by that many more pre-K kids being ready for kinder.
Yeah, there's nothing, Trustee Trischetti, that says research-wise, you need to have 100% of your pre-K kids doing 40-letter sounds, and you'll get this outcome. We just know based on how we've been measuring it over the last 3 years, getting them to 86% at that number and that ratio, we're seeing a performance measure that is allowing our kinder to be, our second graders to be ready to read. So it's nothing that goes in to say, it's just an indicator that we have that says at 72%, we weren't there, 74, 86 is putting us at a place that says, we know that now we've hit a threshold that says we are going to be able to get our kids second grade reading ready by second grade.
Let me ask you this question. John, Mr. Trischetti, do you have any follow-up?
No, sir. Thank you, Mr. Davis.
All right. My question is, recognizing that this goal progress measure 1.1 only measures the 800 or so students that we have in pre-K, and not the entire 2,200 that will be measured to see if we meet in second grade goal 1, and adhering to the recommendations that you only have 3 goal progress measures, no more than 3, to act as an indicator as to whether you're on track to meet a goal. Did y'all consider other goal progress measures as maybe to substitute for this one that might be a better indicator for all 2,200 students to replace this one that's limited in its scope?
I was going to ask the same question, because if we have control of less than 50% of pre-K students entering kindergarten, you know, we could have 86%, and the other 1,200 could have, be it 10%, and we wouldn't be able to achieve, theoretically, probably wouldn't be able to achieve that goal.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting this is an inappropriate one, but is this really still a top 3 one, a top 3 indicator?
I think part of the strategy was, how do we impact kids coming in when they are in pre-K? What do we do in first grade? Kinder, and what do we do in first grade as we get kids ready to read at the second grade level? So I think the team was thinking, okay, we only have 800 pre-K kids. That's all we can control. Let's put them in the data information, and let's then see what do we need to measure with our pre-K kids to know that we've got to hit a standard that we can control that measures up success. Now, what does first grade success look like? Or kinder success look like? And what does first grade success look like? I think it's still a valid one, because they're with us. We need to have some accountability about what we do with our pre-K kids while they're with us, and how do we measure out what that looks like. So I think it's the formulation of it all, and the team did not want to, my words, drop that and say, what's something else that we can measure when we have all the kids? And then we don't get all the kids until kinder. And so we wanted to say, okay, well, kids, when we have them, which I've shared with our community, when we have kids in our pre-K program, this is what we do. It leads to the conversations that we're having back in November. We need to expand what that could look like and increase our touch and reach around that, because it's measuring that we have success with our students.
All right, that makes sense. In other words, what I'm hearing you say is that, well, we may only have 800 of the 2,200 that will determine whether we meet goal 1 in second grade, but we want to have something that holds us accountable to prepare them for the 800 that we do have at pre-K, to make sure that we'll see if an indicator if they're on track to succeed in second grade. And so,
right.
And the other thing you heard you say was that goal progress measures 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3 are all kind of stacked on each other.
Yes, sir.
And so that's important that we've got it measured at each of the 3 years that we have all of them or some of them before they get graded out in second grade.
And it's also, to me, it's not a matter of why, but a matter of why wouldn't we? So why would we not progress monitor our pre-K kids? At least we have 800. So at least we can know and show exactly what's happening in our pre-K classrooms to show that we're getting them kinder ready.
What are the criteria to be in the 800?
So you're economically disadvantaged. So it's a needs-based program. So like the Orlando Riddick kids, they're not in our pre-K program. The expectation is I'm going to help drive what that looks like, but it's a needs-based application program. So you have to hit a monetary level of income within the family, and it's a low income need that drives what pre-K gets.
What about those pre-K I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just sharing it could be some of our most at-risk kids who later we have to, backload a lot of work.
English learners,
second
military,
language,
yes.
Military gets in because of the travel and the destinations that they hit with so much travel, and then income.
Are we capturing any of the data from the pre-K academy at Midland College? I mean, that's a captive audience, and those are our essentially students, going to be kindergartners. They're pre-K. It would add value, I think, to that total number. Is there has that? I know that program's only been going a year, but is that something that's being tapped into?
As
Go ahead.
as part of the partnership schools, I know that Dr. Kill is working with those principals to incorporate into the board goals so that there is a data set that they're also working on that are in line or at least aligned with our board goals.
Right, and right now we don't have any end of year data for our kiddos because we didn't get to, even though they're in their first year, we didn't get any end of year data for them. But we know based on the programming that we do and what they would do, that we would get a high yield result. So we'll see, you know, even though we may have a COVID slide or summer slide, what might be an outcome that comes out from that. But yes, they are in our data set that we would have in regards to what that looks like. We have, I want to say, 50, could be 50 to 60 kids in that program, 4 classrooms. I believe they're not all at 22. So it could be around 60 some odd kids that we have in that program. They'll text me here in a minute to let me know what that number looks like. But yes, they will be part of our 800. So we could say we have 868 kids.
Is there any way that any of the other in-district charters let me ask this another way. Do any of the other in-district charters besides early college or college kindergarten have pre-K?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Well,
And
then
they
we
will
should.
go with numbers.
Their data is in this right here. Their kiddos are in this number.
Okay, so in essence, we would capture all of the pre-Ks that we have, whether it be an in-district charter or just a plain old school, right?
Just getting to the in-district charter piece, they have a performance measure that we've agreed to for their standard of meeting this expectation of being able to read by second grade. Can't pull what that is right now for all of our in-district charters, but yes, if they have set pre-K as that standard, they're in our numbers.
Okay, so if they have pre-K, then they should be in this goal progress measure 1.1. They will help determine the percentage that are at least at 80%, that are at least 40 letters, right?
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we're going to greatly increase in when we say that it's, okay, never mind. Thank you.
They've already been a part of this. So remember, they're taking over programs that we've had already as a partner. And so their pre-K numbers have been in all our numbers already.
I would say the only numbers that are not in this 2019 end of year number was pre-K at Midland College, simply because it was not in existence at the end of 19.
Right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Well, is there any, to try and close this discussion on this particular part, is there any objection to the at least language from teaching and learning?
No, sir.
No, I think at least holds us accountable to say, we got to hit this mark. And I think it's a strong mark for us to hold to because we've worked very hard to get to it. I think that works.
And it's still a data point that we can set and run data around. So I think at least is totally appropriate to include.
Any objection from the board adding that language?
That's fine.
And I made a note of that on mine.
Okay.
We ready to
Okay.
move to
I interrupted
1.2?
you. You were going on the goal progress
No.
measure 1.2.
No, please stop me, because this is the work session and we want the work to be incredible. So then we just need to be able to respond to it.
Jill,
Yes, sir.
I got a question. Is there any thought given to the difference between, let's see, 2018 and 19, and how that might influence go beyond 86%?
I will say for our pre-K teachers, they went into some strong professional development after end of year 2018 with Tucker signing strategies. And I know that when I talked to Kathy Pearson, she feels like that professional development with pre-K teachers is what got them that bump. So I expect that as that training sustains, that we should be able to hit that at least 86%. Did I answer that?
Somewhat. We're not gonna be arbitrary in terms of setting a goal beyond 86%.
That's not my recommendation, but we'll support, the dialogue of the board. If the board feels like it needs to go above that, I feel like by adding at least 86%, that satisfies and praises us for when we're over 86%. But if we hit that 86% mark, we still get to say yes on board reporting when we report out this GPM.
That's a safe zone.
And I feel like that's still stretch. 86% is still a strong number to get our pre-K kids there. And I know that's one of the philosophies behind all of this work is this pushing teachers to get our kids there to improve student outcomes. And I do believe that 86% pushes teachers to get those improved student outcomes. Sure. So we'll move on to 1.2, but feel free to stop me if we need to. So just like we stacked our annual goals, the pre-K2 goal 2 about 3.8, goal 3 about 9.12, just like Mr. Davis said earlier when talking about 1.1, we actually stacked within goal 1. So the goal 1, we want kids to be on or above grade level by the end of grade 2. The way we progress monitor that is by grade level. So 1.1 is in pre-K. 1.2, then we need to measure our kindergarten kids. So our kindergartners at the end of 2019 were at 67%. The end of 18 we're at 66%. The end of 17 at 61%. So knowing that historical data, that's when we went in and set the targets for 21, 22 through year 25 to be at or above, on or above grade level, 75% of our kindergartners by 2025.
What did goal progress measure 1.2 set for in the year 2020?
It was different because remember we aggregated everything together on the old board goals.
That's right. Thank you.
So that's a revision. I don't think the data would be apples to apples. I have where we ended up, but remember it wasn't the same progress measure.
Let me ask you this. One of the reasons why I think we asked for the information about what we had done for the prior 3 years on these particular goal progress measures is to see, on the one hand, we're, our objectives are not to simply set goals that already reflect what the existing trend would be without any further stretching, without any further adult behavior changes, et cetera. On the other hand, I recognize that as you go up the percentage ladder, it gets more difficult to continue to make strides in the same progress as maybe when you started at a lower level. If that makes sense. So, and just to think out loud, then if I look at goal progress measure 1.2, and I look at the last column, it looks like, and I look at end of year 2017, we had 61%, and that was measuring first grade at grade level. Meanwhile, I look above in goal 1 and see that we, as at the end of the second grade, we achieved a 65% grade level mark. So we, from first grade to second grade, we improved by 4 percentage points. For end of year 2018, we were at 66%, and I look above and we achieved in second grade 71. So we improved 5 percentage points there between first and second. If I look at end of year 2019, we went up to 67%. And I look up at goal 1 in second grade, we were at 75%, so we increased by 8. Are you following me? Do you see how I did that?
I think are you using 1.3 or 1.2 to measure out second grade?
I
think you're using
What?
1.2 numbers. You said first grade, but I think you meant kinder.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry.
That's
Every
okay.
time I said first grade, I meant kinder. Yes. Sorry. Goal progress measure 1.2. All those numbers were, I said first grade mistakenly. I should have said kinder. So it was 2 years later that those numbers were achieved. Okay.
Correct.
So now looking at the kinder numbers on 1.2 projected annual targets, and looking above at our yearly targets for second grade, for 21, we want to achieve 69%, but we want them by the end of second grade to achieve 77%, an increase of 8. On 2022, we want to go to 70%, but we want by second grade to go to 79%, an increase of 9. In 23, we want the kindergartens to be 71% at grade level, but at second grade, we want them to be 81. And in 24, it's 73 at kindergarten, 83 at second. So again, an increase of 10, and another increase of 10 at 25, 75 to 85 is an increase of 10. I guess my question is that I do appreciate that we go from 8 to 9, an improvement from kindergarten from last 19 going up 8 to, in 21, we want it to go up 9, 9, 10, 10, 10. Okay. I guess my question is that the reason why those go up 1 percentage point and then from 8 to 9, stay at 9, and then go to 10 and then stay at 10 for the next 3 years. Is that because we think, I guess all of that was to say, is this simply, I don't want to just go with what the trend would be otherwise with our new and improved that got us to where these numbers are from where they were, versus I recognize how it's a bigger of a challenge when you go up the percentage ladder. So could you comment on you think that those are they trends that we're just following, or are they still stretches?
I would say it's a little bit of both, because thank goodness we do have an upward trend. We want the upward trend. But more importantly, the more kids, especially at kinder, that we can get reading on or above grade level before they go to first grade is critical. I think.
Amen.
I think that one thing that's missing in that part that you just spoke about, Mr. Davis, is then the importance of first grade coming in and continuing to escalate us. So if we know that if we can hit these numbers at kinder, then when we get to first grade, we know first grade still has a lot of work to do to get us there so that we can actually hit those second grade targets that are at the top. So strategically stacking these goals so that we can progress monitor each grade level is clearly going to be critical for us to get the second grade mark. So what we did was just look at historically where we were, what's realistic of where we could get while still stretching to be sure that our students are getting everything that they need to make the mark.
Okay.
I'll also say in some of the goals, as you look from 21 to 25, with some of the work that we're doing with campus leaders and teachers in regards to get better faster, some of the work that's just rolling out with the know and show charts and being strategic with planning and really looking at the essential standards that we anticipate. Our hope is that the latter part of these 5 years, we can make even larger gains and more growth as we get all 3 cohorts of school through that training. That's our goal. Is that we actually increased more on the last few years of this subset of goals than in the beginning. So we hope that we surpass these targets, but it'll be a stretch. I feel like these are stretch targets.
Have we given thought, and I know, learning from Mr. Trischetti as well, that this is the important time for these guys to catch on to reading and be strong in it. Have we considered dropping the student to teacher ratio at this grade level? Do we have the manpower to do that, or do we have the classroom space to lower what that ratio is?
I can't answer that question, but what I can answer and thank the board publicly for the budget is that we're going to be able to hire 4 primary reading coaches that are going to go out and be able to support these teachers better so that we can have more coaching conversations, more eyes in classrooms, more facilitated sessions, more professional development, that we will really be able to move the needle on K2. And I'm so excited and so thankful that this board approved that budget that includes those 4 positions, because they will really be impactful, I know, on our K2 reading.
So strategy you're mentioning right now is one that I have thought about and considered. Do we need to, in our primary grade levels, implement more support into the classroom? I think capacity, the pool capacity of what that could look like is a challenge. And so we're going to learn some things from Idea Public Schools, who's coming in, on how they bridge what that could look like for teacher support in their pre-K2 levels, where they have 2 adults in the classroom in many of those instances. So we're going to be able to understand and learn how they maximize what that could look like around student ratios, so that we can have some groups of kids in whole group and some in small group. Now, for them, what they do is they put 30 kids in a classroom. And so they have more kids in the classroom, but they have 2 adults. So in essence, it's a 1 to 15 ratio for a class of 30. So whole group might be 20, small group might be 10. Whole group could be 25, small group might be 5. So they navigate it that way. But that's going to be some of the learning that we'll be going through as we think about, do we need to find areas to put additional staff into and get additional teachers. Now, they're not, in essence, 2 teachers. It's a teacher and more than a teacher's aide, degree, who could become a teacher at some point in time in their career.
I would also encourage us to look, when you look at data sets like this that are stacked, if you track a kindergartner that was a kinder in 17, where they scored 61%, you know that they're a first grader in 18, so they're at 67%. And then you know they're a second grader in 19 at 75%. I think that's also important to see that growth as a group or as a cohort of students. So we really want to ensure that we're tracking kids as they progress through grade levels, not just grade level to grade level year over year, but actually tracking that cohort of students to see their growth. And I am proud to show, that kind of growth there. And that's not the growth that we were able to necessarily show in our former Lone Star governance. And so all that we've learned, I'm excited that we're able to come back and kind of revisit or revise these because that's the cohort growth that we want to see. Our kids growing each grade level that we have the opportunity to impact them. I'm happy to go through 1.3 as well. It's built very similarly as, of course, 1.1 and 1.2 with the historical data there.
And the student-teacher ratio is what, or,
We build it at 22 in kinder. In pre-K, it's 22, but it's 2 adults in the classroom. We put 2 in pre-K, and then it's 22 K4 is what we build our class ratios at. They can be smaller than that. They can go over. So we do have grade levels that we monitor that go to 24. We cap there to say that we don't want to put any more kids in there because it becomes a challenge at that point in time. But we have a number of classrooms that are below 22.
although we don't talk about it, we don't necessarily have a policy per se relative to equity. How is that going to inform equity, guarantee equity in these kids?
So when we think about this performance, we built it out so that we know by gender, by ethnicity, how our kids are performing in economically disadvantaged, right? So we have the factors that the state is going to weigh us out on and measure coming down the line when they get to 3rd grade. So we have to make some determinations based on what that looks like on culturally relevant materials that kids are reading, on what equity looks like, on performance that we're seeing, as well as even going as far as, the presentation of the material. So we take all that into account. I don't know if that's answering your question, or is there something else you're asking that I may have missed?
It answers the question. It seems to me if we are addressing the issue of equity, it's going to influence significantly the outcome. Percentages will I would hope percentages will be much larger down the road as a result of our making sure that kind of diverse curriculum is impacting every child at his or her level.
We did some work 2 years ago around culturally relevant material reading, heavily at the secondary as well as at the elementary. So Candy Callis, who was here with us, led a whole group on what is culturally relevant material that our kids of different diverse backgrounds should see reading materials on.
Well, simplistically stated, if a student sees him or her in the material, that's going to be a motivation.
Yes, sir.
That's the point I want to make.
Absolutely.
And in their training, in the teacher's training, is that really driven home?
I'm sorry, tell me the second part.
The training that Jill addressed, that these
Correct.
teachers undergoing,
Correct.
is that really emphasized?
Oh, it is. We brought in a speaker last year during Elevate named Kimberly McLeod.
Yes.
Thank you. To speak to cultural proficiency. So we, it's a conversation that we keep at the forefront. It is. Just getting a text sharing that many of our K2 classes are 19-1. We build it at 22, and we made a commitment of keeping K2 22, and then 3, 4, although it's 22, we try to meet 22, but we do take those to 24. They do go to 24.
I guess I don't have a question about goal progress measure 1.3. I think covered it for me with your explanation with goal progress measure 1.2. But I guess one thing we didn't do, part of this on this page is goal 1, right? And so my first question is, are the first set of percentages in parentheses 2019, 18, and 17, were those actual end of year numbers?
Actual end of year for 2nd grade.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right.
Can you scroll down or up? I don't know which way, so we can see goal 1.
Nick,
Is that you or Mike? There you go.
Thank you.
All right. So So in connection with that, I guess, with respect to goal progress measure 1.3, I'm pleased to see that if you look in the last column and you compare those percentages of first grades at grade level versus what percentage increase did they improve at second grade, going from 17 to 19, they improved 4, 4, and 5. And moving forward, we're expecting them to improve from 21 to 25 by 7, 7, 7, 7, and 7. So we've increased the percentage that we expect that to increase from the 4s and the 5s that we have today.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Ready to go to goal 2?
Are we ready?
So goal 2, we actually talked through quite a bit in our first workshop in June, simply because this is the goal that I would say as a state and a nation, we are most unsure about. Quite simply because since we're looking at grades 3 through 8 at the meets or above level on STAR, without having 2020 STAR data is really going to be hard to predict. So we did talk in June about potentially pushing these targets setting back until after we get that beginning of year assessment to know exactly where our students are coming in September, because then I think that will allow us to better set the targets if the board is willing to wait for us to get that data. My anxiety over goal 2 is if we go with these targets and our kids come back in August without having 6 months of instruction, I'm very concerned about where our baseline will be for beginning of year. So it's the recommendation from TNL, if the board can support it, if we could get that beginning of year assessment done in September, then could we come back to the board once that data is set and really work through the targets at that point, simply because I don't want to set targets that set us up for failure for the next 5 years, not having a strong data set about where we actually ended in 2020.
That would only be fair for both the students and the teachers.
And I think that if we don't come to some sort of consensus around our thought behind that I think our teachers will be very frustrated. And quite honestly, students only have what they've had the past 6 months, and we've had not the best ability to impact where we want them to be and where we would have wanted them to be at the end of 2020. Tentatively right now, based on the registration for that beginning of year assessment, we'd like to get that registration file in, the second or third day of school. There's about a 48-hour turnaround before the kids are loaded for us to start assessing. And really what that also gives us is time to meet the social, emotional needs of kids coming back, whether virtually, in person, hybrid, whatever model that looks like, but really helping kids build community, making sure our students and our teachers are okay. This beginning of year assessment then, with a deadline potentially of September 4th or 11th, would still allow us time to turn the data around in time for the September board meeting, if that's something that the board is willing to support with waiting on these targets.
Board members, am I incorrect? I thought we had a consensus that we would wait. Am I incorrect in saying that?
I just wanted to be really sure.
We were willing to do so, right?
I thought that there was just a question about could we? We can wait based upon, I thought these had to be adopted by, we were at a hard deadline to get adopted, and that's why.
Correct. We have to get the goal progress measures that we're going to be using adopted. Then I think it was, okay, for the baseline for this target, we have what we want as a goal. We have the goal progress measures we want to measure out. But getting a baseline and data and information out of that would be, we need to wait till September. But yes, we need to get, this will be on the July board meeting or the August board meeting before we start school as an item. But we didn't have to wait. We didn't have to put a number in there and then think about changing the number come September.
Obviously, the more data we have and the more accurate we can make the goal, then the more realistic and accurate and feasible it is. So yes, I'm with Mr. Davis. If we can wait, if it's okay to wait, then yes, I think that we should and get the data.
Well, since these are our goals and our goal progress measures, we can wait.
Well, what was it?
There's nothing hard and fast that says that we have to turn in our goal progress measures by X, is there?
We need to have it before the start of school, what our goals are, so that we're measuring before school starts. What are we measuring before school starts? So we have our goals, what we're going to measure before school starts. We have to gather now, are we going to hit our targets, and what is our target and how do we hit it based on data that we will collect in September.
Right, but I guess my point is we don't have to set the targets yet.
I'm not understanding your answer, Mr. Rick. Is there some TEA or legislative mandate that says we're supposed to do this? I think I'm hearing you say yes.
That we need to have our goals that we set is what I've learned. Now I got to go back and look, that we have to have that set before the start of school. What are our goals? So have we established K2 as reading? Have we established 3-8 reading and math, passing reading and math? Do we have our third goal graduation rate? And we have to have CCMR now as a established goal. So do we have those established? Now, how you get there, I think, is what Mr. Trischetti and Mr. Kennedy and I are sharing. We can come up with our data on how we get there, but we need to have what are the 4 goals.
Are you saying that so long as we identify the 4 areas that we're going to be measuring, we can wait to fill in our actual percentage target goals until after the school year?
It is what I'm saying, and we will get clarity to be certain on. We don't have anything to measure, so we don't want to make something up. We want to make sure it's hard and fast.
I do know that some of those legislative updates were intended, of course, those were all passed prior to COVID, intended to be in place by the first day of school. I know that the CCMR goal, the pre-K goals, all of those things that are part of House Bill 3 have been pushed back to January. So I can't imagine that this wouldn't be allowable to push back based on COVID crisis in general. But Mr. Riddick and I can work with Larry Lee and TEA and try to get a solid answer on that.
I seem to recall that Mr. Lee said something to the effect of, yeah, that's what it says, but we've got COVID realistic problems to deal with, and we don't want to put form over substance.
Correct.
Okay, good. Well, so the only thing different on goal 2 from what you saw in June is just historical data for 18 and 17 on the goal and the progress measures, which again, that's historical data. Once we get a better data set with beginning of year, then we'll be able to go back and determine what those realistic targets that are still stretched, but realistic and attainable to set in when we finish beginning of year testing in September.
I guess we could, adopt it with a draft, officially adopt it as a draft, and then finalize it after the assessments.
I gotta ask Larry Lee on that.
Yeah, see if that's a way to check all the boxes and still be realistic in what we're trying to do here.
Or is there a footnote that gets in the adoption what's coming based on goal 2? So I'll ask them on both ends, adopt as a draft, or can you adopt it with a footnote?
Yeah, I know that. Please ask. I think the problem with, if I understand it, your footnote question is that technically, once you establish your Lone Star governance goals, you're not supposed to change them for at
Correct.
least a year. You're not supposed to revisit them for
Correct.
any change purposes, so
Correct.
I don't know if the footnote gets us out of that.
I like the
obligation.
idea of adopting as a draft because then we would have to come back and adopt a final. So I made a note of it, and I know Mr. Riddick did too, so we can get with Larry Lee
All
and
right.
see.
Oh,
what
yeah,
we can do
great,
that.
thanks.
Okay, so moving on to goal 3, nothing changed other than filling in that historical data. Remember, 3.3 is a new GPM that we're adding. What we found is that our 9th graders are meeting these standards that we've set. We're seeing a little bit of a dip or a drop off now with our 2nd year high school students or 10th graders. And so what we tried to do then is build in a goal progress measure that helps us support our 2nd year high school students, which would normally be 10th graders, but we do have some students in their 2nd year of high school that are not actually classified as sophomores. So we were strategic with that language of 2nd year high school students on 3.3, just to kind of clarify that.
What evidence along the way alerts you to the fact that some of these kids may not make it?
Well, definitely the Algebra
So-
1 completion and the
Correct.
number of credits completion right off the top.
So the agency, through some work, I can't say through the agency, but there's been research and work done on what are the things that hold kids back and what does that look like. So being able to read is clearly one we're addressing, but Algebra 1 is a gatekeeper because it involves a lot of different processes and that you have to do with putting conceptual math together. So we know that's another, and then we know credit attainment is the other. Others become, are you over age, at-risk factors, right? Are you over age? So are you over age in middle school? Are you failing a class? Do you fail a class when you arrive into high school? So there are other things that we weigh as factors. Attendance. What does your attendance look like? Weighs in as a factor. But when we think about course work, it's about course attainment, and Algebra 1 and credits become a big factor in determining are you getting to your graduating class? Are you keeping up with your cohort?
I'll also say a huge red flag, if we have 9th graders that do get their 6 credits and then they go to 10th grade or they go to their 2nd year of high school and all of a sudden that semester they don't have 15, that means all of a sudden they're not on track to get their 6 that year. So how do we intervene? How do we respond? How do we ensure that then they get in credit recovery, or what support systems need to be put in place? Because it's critical then that they have 12 by the end of their 2nd year of high school or by the end of 10th grade. So what this is allowing us to do is progress monitor the number of credits they're earning as a 10th grader or as a 2nd year in high school. Even if you're a 9th grader and you didn't earn your 6 credits, we're saying that we still expect you as a 2nd year high school students to get 6. So at least then you have at least 9. So it's really about how can we intervene and respond to kids that are not necessarily on track as a 10th grader, whether they were or they were not as a 9th grader. We now want to monitor them as 10th graders.
Going back to goal 2, just quickly for a second. In our next time we revisit this, whether it be the board meeting or workshop, whatever, would you include in goal 2, in that first parentheses, the state average for end of year for each of those years, 19, 17, 18, 19, please?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And then same for
Graduation rate?
goal 3, yes, please.
Yes, sir.
We can do that. So just a state average that we measure up against.
Yes.
Yes, sir, I made that note.
And we don't have, and I'm assuming, now let me ask so I don't assume, that for goal 2 are all, those are all, we don't have state averages for the goal progress measures because those are
Right.
Those are local.
software driven
Right.
or whatever, you know.
Yes, sir.
And are there any state averages we can access for goal progress measures 3.1 through 3.3? Is that data available that we know?
Not that I'm aware
We're
of.
not, we don't get that data collected. I'm sure it exists somewhere, but there's nothing on the agency's page that tells us ninth graders are earning this amount of credit attainment.
Okay.
Because they're using Peams reporting may be able to draw some of that out, but that would be a massive upload.
Okay, and as to both goal 2 and goal 3, I want to ask the question. I guess let's break them up. Goal 2, these are increased percentages, if I understand it correctly. I mean, all these are draft percentages, but we're using the same indicators for goal progress measures 2.1 through 3 that we did previously. There are no changes in what we're measuring as indicators. So let me just ask the question that do y'all believe these are your top 3 things to measure to be indicators of whether we're going to reach goal 2? Did y'all consider any others? And they fell short of these 3? I mean, tell me the process or thinking on that.
I would say yes. And our biggest change in goal 2, historic goal 2 was passing standard or above. Revised goal 2 is at meets and above. Because if we don't start getting kids to the meets level, we will never hit domain 3 and kids will not be prepared and ready for the next grade level or course. So that's the big switch between former goal 2 and revised goal 2. Former was passing and above. Goal 2 now revised is meets and above. So what we did was look at what are the targets that we need to hit domain 3 in the accountability system. And so what percentage of our kids need to be at the meets level on reading and math in order for us to get there. So what we did then was go back and look historically. This data set is run through the district checkpoints, the curriculum-based assessments, the content-based assessments from the district that are aligned to STAR. And after a study of these assessments are actually aligned within 5 to 8 to 10 percentage points of where students actually perform on STAR. So we felt like they were very strong predictors of STAR performance.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand. So I understand that we've raised the bar in terms of the goal as to that respect, but the things we're measuring to see if we meet that raised bar are still the same things we're measuring as before when it was a different bar, right? You understand my question?
Yes.
So my question, those are, y'all still believe that these, while we've raised the bar in terms of the threshold, y'all still believe that these are the 3 best things to measure as goal progress measures to see whether you're on track to meet that goal 2. Sorry.
Can you scroll back up to goal 2? Thank you.
I agree. I believe so because I was on goal 3 and now looking at goal 2 around what that looks like. And I believe if we're going to say kids are going to meet the test at this highest rate, what do we have that we can measure that goes up against that? For me is how do you perform at this rate on the test? So let's not use something else that we perform high against if this is what we're saying that you're going to do test wise. I think the team's strategy is, do grades equate to, if you make all A's, right? Does that equate to you being at a meets level? I think those are some things that just what we find, a student can make an A and not pass a test. And a student could fail a class and then make an A on a test. So I think they're trying to figure out, well, what are the things that you could use to measure up against this? And it's you versus the test. I want to introduce Dr. Lisa Good now, who's here with us now, coming from Austin as a new CAO, and allow her to weigh in as well around some of these concepts, because she has worked with Jill over the last week.
Good to see you.
To navigate this.
See your eyes.
Very nice to meet you all. Thank you for having me. To answer the question, which is a really great question, what are the indicators?
Dr. Good, now can I have you come up here just so that they can
Yes,
hear you
I
on
can.
the
Sorry.
mic?
Absolutely. Thank you. It's very nice to be here, and I appreciate the warm welcome that Midland's given us. It's a very warm welcome at 111, I think, but I do appreciate being here. The question, as I understood it, and I was really leaning in before you called my name and thinking, are these, when you kind of limit the number of indicators, which is smart, so you focus on what you want to measure to get you to your goal in 5 years. And so because you can have 46, if you measure everything, then nothing really matters, right? So you want to be sure that you're measuring those indicators that are really based in research, and that there are our experience also in the district points to the best way for us to get that goal. So certainly, that's what I was really thinking about as you start looking at what you want your 3rd and 8th grade students to achieve in order to meet the goals by 2025. You're really looking at it like an SBA, standards-based assessment. I don't think that there's any other indicator that I could suggest. And if you're really looking at reading and math, you're going to be consistent as well, as much as the state gives us consistency, and especially now, but you'll be consistent over the years. So really following the growth of the student in the cohort, the growth of the cohort itself, but also where a student comes in and where a student leaves, the growth of a student from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And so there's a lot of back-end work, including disaggregating data for equity, right? So when you do the disaggregation early on in the beginning of the year and start seeing where your students are falling in really disaggregated data, what they did at the end of the year before that, which we don't have, what we'll get from the beginning of the year, and then understanding what the essential building blocks of learning are, those essential standards, personalizing the learning so that students can achieve quickly on those standards, right? And then moving towards tremendous growth year by year. That's where you start seeing, by the time they get to 8th grade, from 3rd to 8th, they'll be college and career ready. And that's what the MEET standards is. And we want to go for MEETs, and we really want to get to them at master's levels too. So we'll do measurements around that as well on the back end. So there's a lot of other measurements. The other thing around, when I think about when you're looking at graduation rates, absolutely credit accrual is a strong indicator. The only other one that I would consider, but that I think we do that on our end and not necessarily make it part of this measurement, but we can absolutely look at attendance. So if a student is attending regularly, they'll get the credits. And so we influence student attendance, and we measure that in order for them to get a credit accrual that then will lead to successful graduation rates. So I think it's I really want to applaud the TL team. I walked into a very smart, accomplished team that I feel like is in my head and really thinking strategically about what these are. So it's just some beginning thoughts as I start in my 4th day.
Well, if you'll stay up there with Ms. Rivera, I guess on same question for goal 3, but it's to goal 3, I see that we have a new goal progress measure. That's 3.3. And so same question, I want to ask the question, and that is, with that revision, are these the 3 best? And we can do 4. I mean, so I guess we can consider, you can give some more thought and deliberate with the teaching learning team about whether we add an attendance as a 4th one. I don't think 4 exceeds our our recommended limit or
I
anything?
think what we could, what research will show you, really, it's the reading that, it's the algebra, and algebra is a gatekeeper, certainly. Credit accrual, you won't be able to accrue the credit. You won't be able to earn the credit unless you attend. So they're logically connected. But there is a pretty strong, attendance is a pretty strong indicator, or especially in ninth grade. If you can get a student to attend regularly. Now, I will tell you right now, we're figuring out how we're going to take attendance next year. So I just think that it might be prudent for us to sort of have some grace just in how we're going to attend to how much a student is engaging, whether they're remote, whether they're, attending in a face-to-face setting, or whether it's that kind of hybrid model where some of it's going to be asynchronistic. So I'm a little nervous about saying that we would adopt attendance as an indicator for this. I'd just be cautious on recommending that right now, but I can assure you that we will be measuring it carefully, almost more carefully than we have before, because we have to understand really not that a student's just there, but a student is engaging with the work, and a student is progressing through what we will need to accelerate them through.
So it's an indicator we look at all the time and measure out every 6 weeks. We gather our data that comes through. Campuses get their reports on what it looks like by grade level, so they can understand who is lagging. An example would be in pre-K. That becomes one where in a building, pre-K attendance may be in the 80s and everybody else may be in the high 90s. And so we have to work a lot with our pre-K. So even hitting the 86% on what success looks like, typically in our buildings, pre-K has the lowest attendance percentage in a building.
I'll also say that this is monitored for Lone Star governance. We have a whole nother data set that we monitor regularly that's referred to as on track, and attendance is the first indicator in regards to being on track. So just because it's not in Lone Star governance and part of this formally adopted document, there are lots of data sets that we're monitoring, and just like Dr. Goodnow said, attendance is one of them.
And the reason why we're saying not just yet, because as we build our learning management system where kids could be in a virtual option, we're still working through how do you take attendance virtually, meaning if I go on to do my work at 10:30 at night, how am I getting accounted for to be in attendance? And so does that mean logging in? Does that mean turning in an assignment? Does that mean the teacher physically sees me and checks off? And so the state has provided, here are the ways that you can work to take attendance. Now your system has to be able to be designed in it. So on our learning management system that we're going with Google Classroom, we're working to find a way when you log in to the classroom, is that actually accounting for you being there, or does just logging in, there's no clicks or anything that's happening after that? What does that mean? And so it's not there yet. They haven't designed that yet. And so we have to figure out.
Defensive driving?
I have not done that, sir. I paid attention in my defensive driving.
For a veteran of defensive driving courses, I make sure that you're actually engaged. They
ask you questions and test you.
Interim check-ins.
Yes. So we got to figure out that piece on the virtual side. That's why I was saying that attendance is going to be an interesting piece. And the state right now is saying they know it's going to be that way. So for the first 6 weeks, there's a hold harmless. You cannot be worse in attendance than you were last year. After that, then it's fair game.
I'd also make one more point around goal 2. What we're going to use to measure it in the data set we're going to pull are the district checkpoints. But what's important about the data set around goal 2 is that we will triangulate the data with several data sets using Achieve 3000, iStation, Imagine Math. Our programs that support Tier 1 instruction, those will also come into play in regards to instruction leading up to how we're performing in goal 2 and those goal progress measures. So while the data set will be run from the content-based assessments or the district checkpoints, that data would also be triangulated to make sure all that those data sets align to get a true picture of where the kid is actually performing.
Mr. Earl, let me ask you one more question about goal 2. I just came to my attention that we do not have a goal anymore for mastery. So what, I guess we took that out, and what's the rationale for not setting a bar for those kids that are really excelling and trying to grow that number? Because I know that's part of the growth and the goal progress. The goal overall is growing the students that excel.
Sure. So I think that's something that will definitely be monitored internally. But when we wrote the goal of meets or above, those master's kids will go into that same percentage. Then internally, we can absolutely monitor what is that master's percentage and how is it fluctuating.
But does that prove to the community that you are still spending the time to grow those exceptional learners to a higher level? And I know we're pushing it to get to the meets, but are we showing our community that we are wanting to grow the top learners also?
To me, meets and above does include that. It's not lined out like it was formerly. So of course, that's a discussion for the board to have if that's something that needs to go back in. Those numbers are captured by saying meets and above, but it's not a separate kind of line item like it was historically. Another reason for that is when we have to report out for the third grade performance based on all the House Bill 3 legislation, all of the student groups have to be reported out by performance level. So we'll get economically disadvantaged, we'll get all those subgroups of kids, student groups of kids, and their performance level. How many are at approaches, meets, and masters for third grade especially? So, that's something that if the board decides that's something we need to come back to, we'll of course respond to the board's needs.
When we went to the community 4 years ago, 3 years ago, that was a big thing that they asked for. They wanted to see that we're taking care of not only the low learners or the middle learners, but they wanted something to see that we're pushing top learners too. And so I don't know if we would get that feedback again if we take this to the community, that we need a bracket for the top and the master level.
Sure. And this going to meets, I think is a huge learning curve for our community as well. Meets is not the same as passing. And in fact, I would say, there's a very large difference in numbers between passing and meets. So, but I do hear what you're saying, Mr. Murray.
Well, for our next iteration, would y'all please draft a goal progress measure 2.4, which addresses the master's criteria? Is that?
That'd be perfect. That'd be great.
So masters, so it would turn into masters in reading, masters in math. So we'll actually add 2 more.
Well, whatever it was last time, but we want to keep it last time, but keep with the focus being on masters at what it was last time. I don't recall.
Last time it was aggregated reading and math together.
Okay.
What we've tried to do this time is to be able to show our kids that are meeting it in reading, meeting it in math, because the overall goal is the both. Last year or last session, when we wrote the progress measures as both, made it really difficult to determine where kids were in each content area. So we tried to separate those out into a reading progress measure and a math progress measure. So if we want to add masters, I just need to know, we'll do all in reading, masters in reading, all in math, masters in math, just so I have a good idea of what the board is asking.
What are y'all's?
So it would be both, because we're measuring it out this way to say 2.1 is all kids on reading, 2.2 is all kids on math. And then if we want it at meets, then masters would be done. Let's say it's that 2.3 is not there. 2.3 would be masters at reading, 2.4 would be masters at math, and then 2.5 would be the percentage of pre-K students.
We can have 5 goal progress measures, can't we?
Not
Can.
entirely. If y'all will get with Larry Lee on that too, please. And then give us, I mean, unless you're 100% sure what your response is this evening, if y'all want to have some time to think about whether that's a good indicator or not, certainly, Mr. Murray has articulated the reason from a board perspective. We thought that was a good idea before, and he's articulated why he thinks it's a good idea going forward. But from a assessment standpoint, if there are some academic reasons why that makes less sense and is less of a hardcore indicator to reach our goal than these are, or, you know, or whatever. We'd love to hear the teach and learn team's thoughts on whether that should continue to go forward to address the goals that he is seeking to address, and rightly so, or whether there are academic reasons why that's really window dressing and not as powerful as we need to focus on these, or whatever. The
I also
response is.
think that we could be publicly accountable and transparent in writing the goal and the progress measure at meets and above. But anytime we report out on goal 2, we report out on approaches, meets, and masters. And that way we get all three levels in potentially. But yes, we'll go back to the team and talk through all of that and bring that data set for the next time.
Because I mean, I hear what you're saying. I mean, there's what gets measured or graded is what really gets focused on. And so I guess the question is this something that is worthwhile to focus on so that hopefully it gets done, you know, in the context of goal 2? Does that really help us with goal 3 or goal 2 in a meaningful way?
Yes, sir.
We can look at it. We'll do it.
Okay.
We'll get with Larry Lee and build it in. And so we've added it to our notes.
Now, goal 4, you're going to go and then you're going to tell us why we don't have annual targets yet?
Yeah, so goal 4, our recommendation about CCMR, which we talked through at length at our June workshop, is to really let us handle the CCMR goal in a whole separate board-approved district plan for CCMR. We talked through in June a lot about the inability to quarterly progress monitor some of the CCMR targets, since it's such an annual event when we get the data around that. So Jeff Horner is working on and already has as a proposed draft of the CCMR plan that we'll bring to the board that will address CCMR in an external kind of goal setting document that's not part of Lone Star governance, simply because it's really difficult to find those quarterly progress measures for CCMR. So our recommendation is to not put in a goal 4 in Lone Star governance and let us handle that goal setting, that accountability, that reporting in a district plan that the board approves that's separate from Lone Star governance.
Okay. So you've put goal 4 here as a placeholder, but really your recommendation is not to have it be a goal at all, but instead to monitor it separately from these.
Correct. And that is a district approved plan that has to be approved by the board around CCMR. So,
Right. So when we would present these goals, we would present our CCMR along with it as well,
Okay.
but it wouldn't sit under Lone Star governance. And the TSI is the Texas Success Initiative. It's your college entrance exam, in essence, for you to show, are you ready to advance into your college coursework? Are you going into remediation?
And that is something that Mr. Horner's working on. It's work in progress right now.
Correct. It's what our kids take. Our kids take that right now.
that's again part of that House Bill 3 initiative. Initially was supposed to be approved prior to the first day of school. That's now been pushed back to January of 21. So he's working on that, and we'll bring that to the board in the fall so that can be approved well in advance of that January deadline. So moving on to constraints. Constraint 1, still going with the board's theory of action and our really critical work around professional learning communities. This constraint is written similarly to the former Lone Star governance documents. I will say one thing that we learned from our first set of Lone Star governance, we actually wrote the constraint as the number of campuses that would meet this target. What we found when we started collecting data is that if I'm the principal of a school and I have 15 teams, if 14 of my teams got the 3 or the 4 and improved a performance level, but my 15th team didn't get it, then I was counted as a no. So what we decided to do in the revision is really talk through the percentage of teams overall so that campuses could still celebrate all the growth that they're making and be able to report out by team, percentage of teams that are meeting this rather than the number of campuses. So at the end of 84% of our teams would have met this constraint. At the end of year 2020, 91% of our teams would have met this constraint. So in 19, that was 234 teams out of 280. So instead of putting it as a campus number in the data set, we felt like a more accurate performance level is the percentage of teams that are meeting it rather than the number of campuses.
That makes sense, but with less attrition, why do you start at a lower number in 21 than we ended in 20?
Honestly, I think that's probably a typo.
Okay.
Because in the column, the bottom of constraint progress measure column, that's 91% in 2020. It looks like it just didn't transfer over. So I'll make that correction.
So are you saying that 2021 annual target in the, I guess the third column should be what?
I think
No,
what
I
she's
apologize.
referencing in the paragraph that starts on the PLC implementation rubric,
Yeah.
the percent of teams that will achieve or maintain 3 refinement or 4 internalize or show at least 1 level of growth on elements, those are already not at 3 or 4 will increase from 91%. So she's saying that they built it with 91% like you're sharing, but when they went to put it in the target,
It's a typo. It should be 91%.
They should have typed 91.
But even then, that's not even then.
No, it's a starting point. No, it's not. It's not a 91 to 92 starting in 21.
It's not an increase. We're really concerned coming back again from COVID, just how much our teams can grow, learning to do virtual, remote, etc. PLCs in general will look different if we're in a virtual setting. So we tried to at least stay the same.
Okay.
And then hopefully it'll be one of those at least things and we're more than 91.
I understand.
Wanted to be clear about that revision, which we feel like is a strong revision going from the number of campuses to the percentage of teams. Constraint 2 did not change much, only that the end of year 2020, we have 9. This is no change from what we looked at in June. Remember, we won't have ratings in 2020. Everyone's ratings will be not rated due to state of disaster. So left those. And then constraint 3, the number of F campuses with a principal with fewer than 2 years enroll experience will decrease. Currently, we have 2 first-year principals that are at our F-rated campuses. So of course, we want to get that to 0, just as we do on constraint 2.1. We want the number of F campuses, of course, to decrease to 0.
So on constraint 3, let me ask you, we've got 2 currently. So a decision was made that notwithstanding the prior constraint that had a 0, right, that circumstances were such that, the decision was made that it's still in the best interest. That y'all believe it's still in the best interest of that campus to still have someone with less than 2 years experience, even though the constraint said 0.
Correct.
So-
Based on the talent that we had as a candidate,
Right.
yes.
So my question is essentially a fundamental one. Is this having that, in light of that example, is it's still on here. So is this, y'all still of the opinion this is still a good constraint and a proper one to have going forward, with this constraint progress measure still being a good one to have?
I would tell you, I would consider removing it. knowing that we have some talent that's young that we're navigating. It is something that we do look at internally based on the type of campus and the level of experience a person has who's going into that school. So we've done a good job to the TNL team and to administration on developing our talent. Julie Barraza, who's going to be going into Henderson Elementary, will be an incredible principal. She's tutelage under two great principals, but she doesn't meet the constraint, but she will be a good leader and has a great fit into Henderson. So I told the team, I take a hit on that, knowing I have that talented person who's going to go into Henderson. I take a hit based on that's a good fit for her, and we'll support her to do well. But yes, it goes against the constraint because otherwise we go without. Otherwise, we've done this. We've worked to move 4 principals. 2 have retired and 1 jettisoned for another reason. And 1 had to reevaluate several other things as we moved them from a campus that they were very stable at with leadership in years to a campus where they had to now start over and regrow it and rebrand it. There was work to be done.
I'm personally one that, when we next meet again, I'd like you to give some more thought to whether we should continue this in light of your experience here at MISD over the last 3 years about whether this is something realistically that should be a proper constraint or not. And number 1, and then number 2, if not, then, is there anything else that you would replace it with?
We can look at that, yes.
Because I don't know of any other constraint or goal progress measure that by not meeting it, we're still doing what's in the best interest of MISD.
Right. Right.
So, anyway.
No, I'm with you there, sir. Okay, yes, we can certainly look at that and think through what are some constraints that we need to think about that could go in its place.
Other than that kind of concludes where we left off in June with some requested information on behalf of the board that we provided tonight. So again, just thank you for the opportunity to talk through these and really collaborate with the board and just ensure that the board supports the work that will stretch us as teaching and learning and teachers and principals in the district to really absolutely improve student outcomes.
Mr. Rivera, I'd like to say, and also to Mr. Riddick, I appreciate the work that, in the conditions that we're in right now, the work, the time and hours that y'all put in to bring this before the board as a draft for us to look at in the upcoming days to possibly adopt. So again, I appreciate y'all's time and efforts and y'all's team and the work that y'all put in to make it happen.
Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Bishop. I would tell you, Jill Rivera and her team, they spent quite a bit of time in small group efforts starting in January when we said coming out of the fall that we would kick off our teams around goal 1, team around goal 2, team around goal 3, each of them evaluating the constraints. And so they've done a very good job on fleshing all this out through lessons learned, which is what we should do over the last 3 years. So I appreciate you recognizing that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for all the good work. Dr. Goodnow, welcome.
Thank you.
I can't think of a better name for our Chief Academic Officer than Dr. Goodnow. Thank you for being here.
And that's all we have for that.
All right, it is 6:04 p.m. and we will go into closed session in accordance with Government Code sections 551.071 through .074, 551.076, 551.0821 through .084. Thank you very much. It's 6:49 p.m. and we have emerged from closed session and there are no actions arising from closed session, so we are adjourned. Thank y'all very much.